I'm glad there's so many new people. How many of you know about the Maji Center and what we do?
Well, I hope everybody here.
So here's the 2-minute spiel on it. Not even 2 minutes, maybe 30 seconds. The Maji Center is here at NAIT. We support students that want to be entrepreneurs, self-employed, or thinking of working for an entrepreneur company, like intrapreneurs. We basically are a non-credit center that brings programming around leadership, around business tools, around all of the financing options that you might need to start a business. We're here to do one-on-one coaching. We have a ton of networking events that can help you out. And really, we're open to all students at NAIT. We are not just a school of business facility. So we work with culinary, with fitness, with photography. A lot of these people end up becoming self-employed, so we're here to help. So that's really what the Maji Center is about. If you have any questions, feel free to come and ask us. Hope to see you soon. We just launched a podcast on the Alberta Podcast Network. It's called Let's Do Coffee, and it is a podcast that interviews entrepreneurs that are from NAIT and alumni, or entrepreneurs that are students here right now that are going to be that are working their business. And it's a really cool podcast. If you don't have time to come to some of our events. Okay? Awesome. I'll pass it over to Cecile for the introduction of our speakers.
So today we're lucky enough to have our business with us, and we've got Kyle and Catherine here to walk us through the business plan. And if you know anything, you know that states require a business plan if you $1,000 bills. So we're really happy to have them here to teach us what we have.
Thank you very much. So my name is Kyle Clement, and Matt Dalrymple. We're two business account managers with the Royal Bank. And I understand there's people from lots of different backgrounds or areas of education as far as that goes. So how many of you guys have worked with or studied or put together business plans in either through personal stuff or through work? Have you guys seen or used business plans before, or know a little bit about them anyway? Yeah, no, we're here to kind of cover some general information. We're here to talk about some more specific information. A business plan for anyone, which I imagine, just based on that summary of what the center does, obviously if you guys are here, I'm assuming there's some inkling of interest or some general purpose of wanting to be in starting a business or entrepreneurship, and a business plan is really the key document that you guys are going to have to be able to put together or to be able to think about for that. Obviously, we're coming from the banking background side of things, so yeah, as was mentioned, financing is definitely a big component of what we would look at a business plan for. But as a business owner, it's a living document. It's something that you guys can put together for your own selves, and not just right at the beginning or right at the start, but coming back to it, revisiting it to just make sure it's something that you're keeping on top of and just having an idea to see where it all goes from there. So there'll be lots of time for questions at the end. If there's anything as we go through that you guys have questions about a particular component of it, feel free to raise your hand or just ask a question. We're happy to kind of jump in and tackle it as we go along as well. So
I was just going to add in real quick. So basically what we do is we deal with existing businesses, but also brand new businesses as well. So when people are just getting off the ground and looking for that initial financing, we work with them. We also work with businesses that already exist when they're trying to finance new ventures and things like that. That being said, we actually deal with every market. So we have, on our desk, me and Kyle each have about 200, 250 businesses that we would actively manage. And then that would range from daycares to restaurants to oil and gas services to gyms, pet stores, you kind of name it, we maybe have dabbled in it and done financing for. And there's little intricacies to how you want to present things depending on the business. So we kind of things we touch on here in the business plan may not be for every business plan, but just a little background of what we do in case you guys have questions about that at the end. So yeah, you ready to get started?
yeah.
The riveting stuff, so hopefully everybody's had their coffee, so ready to go?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
got the clicker, so this
So the importance of the business plan, as we talked about, it's a living document. It's going to be something that you guys have at your disposal. Certainly, from a starting a business standpoint, it's something that you guys would want to put a lot of thought into or a lot of direction towards at the beginning of the stages, because it's going to set you up for success down the road. It describes what the business does. It obviously gives you a description or an idea as to define what you're wanting the business to do. Evaluates the progress as you go. As I mentioned, it's going to be something that you start with, but you can come back to, so you can see the goals that you set up at the beginning or the targets you thought you might be working towards. How on track are you for that? Evaluating new opportunities. Obviously, what you identify as the start might be something that's going to evolve and change over the course of your life as that business. And then, of course, supporting financing requests, as we talked about. There's the internal reasons of having a business plan, which is for yourself and for the evolution of your business. But when you're presenting your business plan, there's a couple other parties that you might be doing that to. Financial institutions, if you're looking for financing, and investors. There's different types of businesses. As Catherine said, some groups may not necessarily qualify for financing, and some groups may not qualify for investors to get on board. And it's going to be something where you might want to tailor some of your business plan to whoever you're making the presentation to for that particular aspect of it. So, for example, on the financing side of it, we would look at something more tangible, if you're needing equipment, or if you're buying a building, or leasehold improvements, which is renovations to the space you're going to be in. That's something that falls more under the financing side of things. So when we look at a business plan, we're going to be looking at how that support of the business can support what you're looking for that. An investor, for example, you see that a lot in the tech industry now, where you might have a lot of research that needs to happen, or some of the intangible things where you're needing to put things together. May not fall under what we can look at under the bank's perspective, but that's where an investor is going to be more interested. So they're going to have aspects of the business plan that they're going to want to look at from an investor's perspective to see what's going to be the best fit as far as that goes. So at the end of the day, it's answering the question how. You're putting the business plan together to see how it's going to be able to get from your idea to making the business happen, and putting all the thought into place to get that to be as far as that goes. So.
So there's basically 7 main sections that we're going to talk on the business plan today. So we have the introduction. You'll then talk about your team, the business environment, marketing plan, operations, finance, risks, and conclusions. So we have slides for all of these, so we'll break it down as we go. But these are kind of the main core concepts that you will want to address throughout. One thing that we're going to touch base on several times throughout is you always want to be the person bringing to light a weakness or an opportunity, because if you're presenting a business to, for example, the bank, they're going to find the weakness, and they're going to find it's better to mention it first and have a mitigation for it than have us find it afterwards and come ask me questions.
So yeah, so first the introduction. The introduction at the end of the day is just like if you're putting a cover page together with a resume or anything that you're preparing to present to somebody, it's your synopsis, it's your snapshot. So you've got the cover page that would tailor specifically to who you might be gearing it towards. Again, financial institution, investors, even just your own staff if you're pitching it to try to get people to work for you. It might be something that they want to see what sort of thought development you're going to. So cover page kind of just, again, tailored to who you're giving it to. Table of contents should be more succinct, just an outline of highlighting what you're doing with that. But the most important part of the whole introduction section is the executive summary. So we'll get into that one in a couple seconds here just to talk about it in more detail. But at the end of the day, the executive summary is it's the first thing that is going to be of substance in the document, but it's going to be the last thing that you're going to write, because all the executive summary does is going to highlight all the things that we're going to talk about from the areas of the business plan, the 7 at the top there, the team, the business environment, the marketing. That's all going to be highlighted in the executive summary. So in order for you to make the best executive summary, you want to be able to speak to the things that are going to come in more detail in the rest of the document as far as that goes. So
if we were getting the name we wanted to know, is that just if you're incorporated as a business or sole proprietor? How do you?
yeah, all of the above. Yeah, no, absolutely no. It's a good question. Yeah, for those that don't know, there's different ways to set up a business, and some of that's going to come down to what we look at on helping on the financing side. So as a sole proprietorship, there's different levels of involvement you may or may not be involved in. As a corporation, that's set up legally from a tax perspective differently as well. So there's 3 main people that you're going to, as a business owner, there's 3 main groups of people that you're going to want to kind of get involved with. An accountant is going to be a very key member of your team. a lawyer to handle the legal aspect of registering the business, whether it's a sole proprietor, trade name, corporation, etc. And then, to be honest, either your banker or your investor, because the banker on the ongoing side of things, we're going to be able to work with you on certain financing questions, as you talked about, but just even your day-to-day operations, we can help. Even if you don't need money lending, we can work with you on your financial statements to help complement what the accountant's going to be talking with you, because they're going to be focused on how they can help you on a tax perspective, or they're going to have certain things that they'll focus on based on their experience. That doesn't always jive with what a bank might need. Like if you think you might need financing in a year or two, how you may want to talk about your finances and how you may want to talk about your plan with your accountant may change how you actually want to show your finances, because an accountant, if they're focused on you paying the least amount of taxes, they're going to structure certain things, write off as much as they can, show the least amount of income. But then from a bank's perspective, if you go to say, I want to apply for a loan to do this, 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 and this, if you're showing the minimum amount of income possible, that's going to reflect that, well, can the business actually afford the payments for doing this, 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 and this. So there's different keys in the whole cog that kind of go together as far as that goes. And yeah, so how you set up the business is one of those components. And then the team you would work with as far as your professionals that would help you get to point A to point B would also have a bit to talk about that for sure. So
One thing I would just add is we have, Kyle and I have we often go off on tangents, as you can see. So we'll fire through this real quick and we'll take all the questions you have at the end. Otherwise, we'll just get going in circles. We have a habit of doing that. So the executive summary, basically, like Kyle was saying really quick, is it's kind of like the hook. It's the initial part. It's what's the person going to read it first, and that kind of has to summarize what you're trying to do right then and there, and hook their interest. So it's going to include a few things here. What is your industry sector, target market? How will you differentiate yourself? As we see here, number 3, what's the structure of it? Is it already in operation? Is it a startup? What are your team's experience and credentials and projected financial performance? So this is kind of, in a nutshell, all the other factors, all the other parts of the business plan rolled up into one. It really is that hook line at the start to try and kind of sell it immediately, because first impressions are key. Everyone knows that. So really, if you don't have much detail at the very beginning, if you can't really articulate what it is you're trying to do, I mean, is anybody going to continue to read the next 15 pages if you couldn't really decisively say what it is you're even trying to do?
and especially when you come to the investor side of things, if it's not necessarily for what we're doing, but as an investor, they may only get as far as the executive summary, where they might have a stack of a whole bunch of business plans for a whole bunch of people with proposed business ideas, and they only have so much to give out as far as that goes. So they're going to want to, just like an employer, if they've got so many resumes sitting on their desk, they're going to look for certain things that catch their attention in the cover page. So that's what the executive summary kind of out from that. So this is an example of one. As Captain said, obviously it's meant to kind of highlight and summarize a whole bunch of different aspects of the whole rest of the document in one place. So we're not going to necessarily read through it word for word, but just kind of highlighting some of the things you can probably see as you catch through it. Highlighting what the business does. So this is the focus of the business. Talking about the industry, talking about some of the operation side as to what you've put together to think about that. The team, whether you're a sole proprietor or whether you're a corporation, your team might just be you, but at the end of the day, you want to sell yourself as to what industry experience you have, what you bring to the table as far as the expertise from that. If you're a corporation and if you're planning on having partners or other people where you might be knowledgeable in certain areas, but you've got other people to take advantage of the things that you don't know as much about. If you're wanting to open a restaurant and you are really good at managing people, but you're also bringing in someone that's been an executive chef somewhere else so they can handle that operation side of things. So it's highlighting who your team is, what they do, and what that brings to the table. The operation side of things, what sort of expectations you have for what your income might look like, your expenses, what you're planning to pay yourself. That's important to also acknowledge is not only just who your team is if you're paying salary for staff, but how you plan to pay yourself as well, and the fact that you've put some thought into that, because from the bank's perspective as well, we're looking at not only just the business being feasible, but we're looking at the bigger picture. If you're an individual, if you've got a mortgage, or if you've got car payments, or you've got a family, we don't want to just say, we're going to set you up for success into the business, but you don't really show how that's also going to match what you can do for yourself personally as well. So any market research, any advertising you might have completed just to kind of get a grasp of things. So like I said, the one snapshot of a few paragraphs or a couple sentences kind of highlights the general summary of what you've put into the rest of the details for the rest of the document. Kind of go forward from that. So.
Perfect. So as we kind of alluded to the team here, so this one's actually key because when you're opening a small business, oftentimes like Kyle alluded to, is it's usually just the owner, the one person. If it's a sole proprietorship, they're everything. So if it's a brand new business, how do we judge success? Like daycares make a lot of money. There's lots of kids, everyone knows that. But if maybe I was an electrician and now I've decided to buy a daycare, that doesn't mean the daycare is going to be successful, right? It all comes down to the owner, it comes down to the team, and in the business plan, you really want to, specify why it is you are qualified for that role. What do you bring to the table? That's going to be your education, your work experience, your volunteering, anything like that. Anything you might be relevant, could be relevant. Even if it's irrelevant, I would say add it because I don't know that you can include too much information when you're trying to speak to, why you're qualified, why it would be successful. We have board of advisors here. Again, this may not be applicable to a lot of people if they're just thinking about starting their own small business, but this is where he also alluded to professional services. If you have a good lawyer, an accountant, a banker, you do want to include them because, for example, if you have a really good accountant, they might be connected. They might have their own circle of influence, and someone might read your business plan and know that accountant, and then just knowing each other, being connected that way can really show that you have all your ducks in a row, that you have everything lined up. Lawyer, we see things sometimes. There's a general structure to things. Usually you want to do the business plan first. You want to have an idea, but it doesn't always work out that way. Some people will get leases. They'll be signed into leases and starting a business before they have an accountant, before they even have a business plan. And so it's really important, I think, that you got to get everything structured and in place at first. And the team is huge. This is basically you saying why it's going to be successful, why I can lead this to being successful. The next would be the business environment. So business history, industry trends, creating your position in the industry. This is where we're going to talk, about basically first research, websites like that where you can compile a ton of information. This, like the team, I would say include as much as possible because if we're flipping through a business plan and we're doing a credit application and you're asking for money, we need to be able to say what you do, how you'll be able to pay it back, and things like that. This is where you're going to show a grasp of your industry. What part of the city are you going into? How many competitors do you have there? How many percentage of Canadians that might use your product? This information is actually available online. There's the Dun & Bradstreet First Research, really good website. It'll show you market research. A lot of it is American information, I believe, but there's market research in there that will show you key opportunities in that industry and also key threats. Another thing that we're going to get into later in the marketing plan, but basically, as I had mentioned earlier, you want to identify weakness and opportunity yourself in the business plan because there's keen eyes out there, especially when you're looking to borrow money, and they will notice, and they'll know of other businesses that were like yours that tried to start. So when we're talking about your place in the market, your industry trends, things like that, you're going to want to include things, even if they're not necessarily good. You want to have a way that you're going to mitigate it. Maybe other businesses in this industry have had a hard time. Maybe you know why they failed and how you could do better. So you want to include any information like that. Something that would basically make you stand apart. A huge thing here though is that first research and just describing industry trends. So if there's something that you know that the rest of us don't, because I don't know everything about every business that we deal with. We know about the banking side of things. You guys need to tell us about the business, and then we can kind of look into it afterwards. But that's huge here. This is where basically you're going to say why your business would be a fit and why it would be successful.
How many people have done a SWOT analysis before in any capacity? And that's basically what this is highlighting where your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and then as Catherine said, the opportunities you can present to the table, and then the threats that you're wanting to anticipate ahead of time just to try to mitigate.
So this one basically kind of ties in. So you got your target market, services and products. In the marketing plan, you're going to outline exactly what it is if you have services to offer. This again, where kind of it's tailored to what your business is. A lot of businesses out there in construction stuff, they're not selling a product per se. They don't have retail and things like that. So it's where you're going to line out your pricing strategy. So if you're a daycare, what are the costs of competitors in the neighborhood? Are you going to be coming in a little bit cheaper? This is where you want to basically outline all the information around the marketing plan. Do you have a mail out that you want to do, Facebook page, social media presence, which is easy to do right now, website. Did you build it yourself? Are you going to pay someone to build your website? We have clients to this day that don't have websites, if you can believe it. And it's really something where, you know, with search engine optimization and everything, you wanna have a website, you wanna have a Facebook page, you wanna be able to be found. So the marketing plan, you know, this one usually it sometimes falls by the wayside because, you know, people know how to run their business, they know about the industry they're going into, they might not be marketers. But it's something that you don't wanna discredit because, you know, it's all about outlining how you're gonna get to the goals that you're setting out. So target market, that's huge. Again, first research would be huge for that. Advertising and promotional strategy. Even if you have a few ideas on how you're gonna drive buzz, drive business when you open, then this is where you wanna include it. So operations. So operations is gonna be basically just how you're gonna, this is one's very dependent on your business, your product. If you're, you know, if it's something from raw materials, you're actually manufacturing something. If you're bringing it in from overseas, you're seeing a lot of online retailers, a lot of people selling through Amazon and Walmart now, even in Edmonton. This is where you outline it, where you're gonna procure everything, how much that costs. The process, you basically wanna show, you know, there's the whole chain, supply chain management. You wanna show, depending on your business, how you're gonna manage that, and that you fully understand that you know where you're gonna get your products, and you know what you're gonna sell them for, who's gonna buy them, and then how you're gonna do that. So the operations is basically just that. You're gonna outline how you're gonna run your business, basically. And you wanna include all that information, because again, the more it seems that you appreciate and understand what you're trying to do, you know, the better it reflects when we're doing applications and things like that, because a huge part of the 5 C's of credit is the character of the person applying. And you know, a really strong business plan as opposed to just a single Word document page speaks a lot to character.
All right, so next one is now more in our bread and butter, which is the financing side of things, which obviously encompasses a lot of components, but just personally, who sets a budget? Who's set a personal budget for themselves? Do you guys have a budget? Do you revisit it? Do you come back to it every now and then to see? That's where we start to look at for the business. And again, this is something you're going to be putting in place. Yes, if you need financing, we're going to be certainly spending a lot of time looking at these numbers. But it's also as an entrepreneur, as a person starting up a business, or even as you continue to run a business, this is a place where you can kind of come back to revisit things for yourself. So cash flow statement, obviously the flow of cash. It's, you know, the bread and butter of any business is cash is king. So money coming in, where that money's coming in from, how you're generating that income, and then of course the money going out, what expenses you have, how that translates to what that's going to look like. So again, for the income statement, looking at your expenses, and then the balance sheet, looking at, again, the assets and liabilities, the things you've purchased, or inventory that you've produced, or sales that you have anticipated, receivables, and then just expenses that come with that going forward, and the equity in the business as well. Because again, coming back to that point we made earlier, how you pay yourself. Some people will take a salary, some people will leave the money invested in the business to help with the growth of the business going forward as well. So, just like anything, the more you put into this ahead of time, the more you're going to get out of it, and the more you come back to revisiting it, the more successful you're going to be. Because studies have shown, you know, the more companies, not only doing a business plan, but the more they do with the business plan, are more likely to be successful because you've thought about all the different things that might come up. So, on the cash flow side of things, expenses to look at. There's going to be some one-time expenses, just like a household. There's lots of one-time expenses that are only going to be applicable when you first set up the business. And then there's going to be some ongoing and recurring expenses that you're going to have to take into account. So when you're looking at your cash flow, you know, when we look at financing, we look at 2 to 5 years of cash flow. We'll ask business owners to think about 2 to 5 years of expected cash flow, so that you've actually not only just focused on what your expected kind of day one or what you're thinking about, but then you go to talk about the operations of the market, talking about what your anticipation is to growing your business. You can kind of build that into a cash flow to establish that, you know, we know there's going to be a bunch of expenses up front. There, a lot of businesses are top heavy on the expense side, but then that's going to build forward when to show how your cash flow is going to improve. And when you look at, you know, return on investments for an investor or being able to pay back a loan, we want to know that you thought about that long-term perspective. Is, you know, you may not make money for the first 2 or 3 months because you've had those top heavy expenses, but by month 6 or by year 1 or by year 2 or what that looks like going forward, to know that you built into your thought process of how it's going to develop going forward. So.
And just one thing is when we're dealing with brand new businesses, I guess just to be like really bluntly clear, these are mandatory in any kind of new startup where we're doing financing. So people are asked when they're presenting their new business to us, they're looking for a credit card, even anything like that, we need an opening balance sheet and we need an income statement with projections. So they have to have put in enough thought that they know where they're starting at day one, how much they've put into the business, balance sheet. I don't know if many of you have worked with balance sheets or income statements very much, but from day one, and then how it's going to look, as Kyle said, in the first year. So, you know, if they run their own numbers, the idea of the business idea might be good, but they run their own numbers and they're at a loss in the whole first year. They're going to present that to us, which, you know, you don't want to, projections are hard, you don't know how everything's going to turn out, but this is something that a lot of business owners and prospective business owners, people wanting to be, you know, own their job, they overlook this stuff. They've never done financial statements before. Either they've worked for somebody else or they were sole proprietor where it's a little bit different. They've never done this before, and this is a mandatory piece, and this is where really having that accountant, having those connections can be huge, because this stuff's mandatory. You have to have projections, and you have to have numbers of what you could do, what your business could do. The idea itself just doesn't cut it. So this stuff is mandatory, FYI.
And as Colin said, you know, just because you may not have the knowledge or the experience with the financial statements, the accountant, if you have a bookkeeper, whether it's someone you brought into your team directly, or whether it's just that third party that you use as your long-term accountant, they're going to see this. Obviously, that's their job. That's what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And even consulting your account manager as a banker, they can certainly help guide in some of the directions as to what may be important to include and to project as far as the statements going forward. So, and then the last one is risk. Obviously, as we mentioned a couple times now, risk is important for us to know that you've looked at it. And it's important for you as a business owner. Even if you're not coming to anybody to ask for money, it's still important that you've thought about all the possible risks and more importantly, how you're planning on mitigating them. If it's you know, helping to look at the industry, looking at the idea, if it's something that you have a really strong passion about for your particular business, then it's one of the components is going to be how successful is that likely to get off the ground. And so looking at all the other factors, your competition, your market, your city or country or province, or any regulatory impacts that might come from that. You know, there's lots of factors that may be something to consider. And as Kathleen mentioned earlier, the most important thing is to say that you thought about them and that you have an idea as to how maybe that was applicable for someone else, but you know that you can work through it or work around it, or you have a solution to get past it, or you've taken it into account and you still think you can be successful in spite of it. Because at the end of the day, again, if someone else has to ask the question, have you thought about this or have you thought about that, and is this really going to be a good success? You know, you go on or you watch Dragon's Den or those types of shows where, you know, they may have the best presentation in the world, but those people have been in business for a long time, and they have other things that they might be thinking about as kind of the keys that they're going to trigger on or talk about, and you want to just make sure that you address as many of those as possible to kind of highlight what you're thinking about from a management of your business standpoint. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the considerations that you have, you know, get conclusion, summarizing what we've talked about, you just want to address that you have thought about and address all the things that you've kind of come upon on your research, and that you know that you've got an opportunity to work through it.
And so I know I've repeated this a million times, but there is that first research website. The reason I go back to that is to give you an idea. It'll basically highlight key threats or weaknesses in certain industries. Just to give you an idea of something you want to maybe address is, you know, if you're in a retail environment where you may have high turnover of staff, that might be something you want to include, how you might mitigate it. Maybe you have personal connections, you've worked in the field, you know people that would be good employees, they want to work for you, so you can mitigate the turnover of staff. But like I said earlier, if it's something that would be glaring, something that we could look at it and identify as a weakness and you've left it out, you don't want to be in that position. So you always want, if it's something that you think is a weakness, you have a way to counter it, you have to include it, because if we find it and then have to ask you about it, everything we do, for example, goes to credit people that scrutinize everything really heavily. If they have to ask us about it, and in turn we have to then ask you, we're behind the 8 ball already. So you really want to own everything up front and have a plan in place for how you would counter it, basically, is the best way to handle it.
And yeah, last but not least, at the end of the day, as we talked about, it's a living document. Revisit it. Whether you're needing something, again, financing, investments, or just for yourself to, check in after 3 months, after 6 months of starting your business, open the doors, how are things going? Everybody has the best intentions, and then something will happen and you'll get skewed right off the track as far as that goes. So come back to that perspective and say, okay, how are things doing? Is it maybe for the better? Things are going well because of that, or not? And at the end of the day, you still want to be able to address that. And again, not every business is going to be successful right away. Not every business is going to be successful in the long run. But ideally, if you put as much work as you can into the beginning thought process, and then you can kind of revisit it and tweak it as you go along, you're setting yourself up for the best chances of success. And resources like the center here, and there's lots of other availability for, again, with your professionals, with your industry peers, or with people that you kind of just had a chance to chat with, the resources to kind of make this as successful or as likely as successful as possible. And just again, changes can happen, they will happen, and be open to that. Just knowing that what you started, the path that you started off with at the beginning, is by no means going to be where you're going to end up at the end of the day, and to give you the opportunity to grow from that and make the improvements you need to. So.
And basically, not every business plan we receive is nice and leather bound and has like colored graphs and everything like that. It's just more about putting, as Kyle said, the time and effort into it. I think you end up, what ultimately happens is you uncover things that you didn't consider, things you might not have thought of that could be a problem for you. It's really for you as it is for us. So, it doesn't have to be really fancy, but it does have to have some effort. And like I said, I think when you put in that effort, you discover things you might not have planned for. It's really, we see a lot, and I said people do things out of order all the time. In a perfect world, you would do a full business plan and you'd do projections and you'd have an idea of how everything would work before you take that first, really basically the 2-foot plunge that people will do. It's really best to be as organized as you can be in a situation like this, because there's a lot of factors and things that come up. So.
And we don't necessarily just highlight it's important to emphasize the getting over the risks and the negative side of things, but the other thing as well is people with great ideas put the effort into a business plan. It just helps solidify that, yes, this is going to work, and you've thought about the market, you've thought about the customer base or whatever clientele you're looking to make, you've got the experience and the team that's going to put that together, and you've solidified your chances that you don't need to make it to the moon. We need to start with the baby steps, and that's going to be successful on its own, and it gives us a chance to grow from there. So there's lots of degrees of success, and the more likelihood of success comes from the effort of getting to that stage. So one of those resources, like I said, lots of different resources available to you. This is our public website, so it's available to anybody to check out. Has a template for a business plan, talks about SWOT analysis, it talks about cash flow calculations, a template for projections, things like that. So, you can Google, and there's lots of resources to find them. This is certainly one that we have available to us that we prefer anybody to check out. Just lots of great information on starting a business. So, from the financing side of things, from the legal side of things, from the talking about registration and the type of business. And again, accountants and lawyers are going to be able to answer some more specific questions to their niche area of expertise better than we can as to what structure might be best for you, or what legal considerations to take into account, or from the accounting side of things, how things might play out. But just as a general grasp of information, that's a great one-stop shop to be able to get a lot of information on a lot of different subjects about starting or operating a business for yourself. Right. So I know we've kind of highlighted through a lot of things, but any areas of that or components of that or questions you guys might have from...
Will we be able to get that slide deck?
For sure. I know we emailed it here to the...
I can post it on our Moodle course.
We'll just double check first.
Yeah, please do. And then
we'll
once
just
you let me
email
know.
you, let you know, yeah.
Yeah, most of it's public advice stuff, but for the actual final deck, we'll make sure that it's a version of it that can be distributed.
That it's ours to give out.
Yeah.
But if anybody has questions, more maybe around what we do for small businesses, as well as business plans, feel free. Yes.
You talked about this
Okay, so the first research. So it's done in Bradford. I always forget the first bit, but First Research website, and basically it just summarizes key components of niche markets. So you break it down to breweries around there, daycare, after-school care, things like that. It pinpoints new articles in the industry I think a lot of it is US market focused, like they'll have numbers from the US market, but it will outline things that you maybe didn't consider as like a threat in the industry or something like that. Yeah, so I think it's free. I think it's free, but lots of information on there.
You can also go to the business link, and they have research material available to anybody who engages with the business link. And they're coming in after Christmas to do a session on research for your business.
Might have to come.
Two-part question.
Sure.
So big bank like yourselves, you guys probably wouldn't fund a straight starting from the ground, like no history, no 2-year passion.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's where the business plan comes into a big component of that, because we'll always look at two sides of the equation. The business information, obviously, and then the personal, who the person is that's coming to the table. So looking at your income and credit history personally, but also the thoughts and process around the business. So any business that you've put together, if it is less than 2 years, because after 2 years, we can start to look at your account prepared financial statements, your information showing how you've done over the last couple of years to kind of give us some idea where things are going in the direction you're going in the future. But exactly, so anyone starting up from scratch, that's where the business plan highlights that, because it's the projections as opposed to the actuals. But that's where the whole idea is, we put thought into where you're going to be starting day one, and we're going to base our help and support around that. And we do have access to through RBC, as well as through there's a government guarantee program for startup for the Canadian Small Business Finance and Lending that we'll do through us to facilitate that as well. And that's where the government and the bank help mitigate some of the risk of being a brand new startup to help with the financing for that. So there's
The second part question, say you already have an existing business, you want to, what's the relevance of a business plan for branching out into like a larger chain, opening a second
location, yeah, like that. Same thing is, yeah, in essence, I mean, we see this with a lot of businesses as well, is that the success of one location doesn't necessarily translate to the success of the second location. So same thing, looking at the area, looking at the new market, looking at kind of what thought you put into that. Same thing as well, is if you take over an existing business, just because a location of a business has been in operation for 20, 30 years or whatever, and new owners take it over, was the success of that location based on the individual owners that used to own it, or was it based on the name and the location? Because they're, how much is that going to translate into the new business as well? So anything like that you can say that you thought about it, and you can mitigate just the aspect of it that you've put into consideration to what that new location, or that new business, or that expansion of your existing business. At the end of the day, you want to show the success of how that's going to translate to the next stage of it. So yeah, we've used the, like I said, if you've been in operations for a while, we'd certainly look at your financial statements to show how the existing business is done. But the business plan kind of fills in all the gaps and the cracks of all the stuff that might be less obvious from the financials, but we can certainly take it from the next step to look at all the extra stuff.
Like maybe you would just create one for the expansion, why it's viable. If it's the same business, you're just opening a new location, then maybe you don't need a business plan if you already exist. Like if it's the same business. One thing I would just add is when you're a brand new startup like that, a lot of it's based on personal credit and personal cash injection and things like that. So a lot of times people will have a business plan, they have a business idea, they might not have the capital to get it off the ground. That's where the planning really comes in. You know, you really want to know how much you need to get started, how much of that can you contribute. Two really key questions when we're looking at the beginning part.
Yeah, having some skin in the game, just to know that you put some thought into it, that you're invested in it as well as you want the bank to be, and to move forward from there. And as Kevin said, you don't, anything over a couple of years, you don't mandatorily need a business plan, but it's never going to be a bad thing. Like, it's never going to be something that, because we have that 2-year history, we can look at the financials and see how the business has done in the past. But the business plan is there for your strength as well as ours. So if you can provide, as Kevin said, any credit that we do, we have certain things that we can kind of talk about on our level, but as far as the final approval, we have our adjudicators, because banks and investors, they give out money based on risk. They're there to know that it's going to be we want to set you up for success. We don't want to put you in a position where we don't think that the business is going to be feasible, but we'll give you a $100,000 loan and hope for the best. And if you have to go and not make payments and go to delinquencies and bankruptcies, and well, we'll just take that chance and roll the dice. Like, we're not in the business to set you guys up for failure. So we want to make sure that as much as we're doing our due diligence, you've done your due diligence as well. So when it comes to the business plan to fill in those gaps, again, it's only adding strength to the case, because we have to present it to our credit adjudicators and say, we really want to support this application for this new business and this new location. The more that we know from the business plan and talking to them, the more we are able to fill in the gaps and build a solid business case, the more we're likely going to be able to work with you and be successful on helping set that up down the road. So that's where it just kind of fills in the gaps, where even if we don't have to have one, it never hurts to have one just because it helps us be able to kind of revisit what you guys have put together and thought about and put on paper, which allows us to kind of maybe ask the questions before we send it in, because then we can have a little bit of dialogue about where we're at and what we can support.
Yeah, that's good.
Any more questions?
You talked briefly, you just mentioned twice.
Yeah. So, oof, you're gonna test me here. So we got capacity, credit, which would be like your credit history, character, collateral, and yeah, no, so basically it's, I'll have to try and think in the last one, forget the last one, but basically, so we look at the 5 C's as kind of like a backdrop when we're doing the application. So, capacity, I think did I say capacity? So that's gonna be like how much cash you have. So like when I said, when it's a brand new startup, we're looking at personal credit a lot of times. So if people have a really good business idea, and they do a business plan, but your idea is like you don't have any personal cash to put in, it's hard to go from there. So the capacity is basically how much you have to service your personal debts, like Kyle was talking about earlier, and then business debts if you need to. Because if you're getting lending under the business is what pays you. So if you got a lot of personal debt, that's, and then character is like I was saying, so speaking to the person in general, that comes from our interview or our discussions with an individual. Do they know about the industry? Have they worked in it before? Are they just switching their career in the middle of their adulthood on a whim? Things like that. It's just the 5 basically characteristics. Collateral comes down to if you're securing something against a loan and things like that. But the majority of the big ones are credit history, your own capacity, and then character as well. So that's why when we're saying the team is huge, you got to speak to yourself, you got to sell yourself as much as you're selling the business, because the business only succeeds if you succeed.
Is that, what's that, good point in? Do you guys have a minimum amount for loans, or is there a certain group of people that do smaller loans or bigger loans?
So, to your, the bank as a whole can find a niche depending on what you're looking for. There are different areas of advisors that will deal with different levels of businesses. Catlin and I deal with small business or business markets, which basically can go anywhere up to $750,000 of lending. So for most businesses, depending on what you're getting to start with, there's 2 main types of credit that we would look at. There's operating credit and term credit. So term credit, like if you're buying a house or buying a car, just on the personal side, it's going to be for buying equipment, buying a building, buying something that's tangible. And then there's the operating credit, which is your credit cards or your operating line of credit to help with your cash flow month to month, with your the flows of money coming in and coming out. Because a lot of businesses, that's where, whether they're just kind of maintaining themselves or whether they're growing, the operational side of things is one of the bigger components that a lot of people may not think about. Because if you're manufacturing something, you obviously have to buy all the materials up front, you have to buy all the staff to work on it up front, but you may not get paid on that supply until 30, 60, 90 days down the road once you've actually sold your product. But in the meantime, you've got other orders for things that you need to keep buying your supplies to build that. So the operating will help knowing that we know the money's coming in down the road, we just have to get there to be able to keep doing your work and get your business going with there. So yeah, so any level of, some people only need $5,000 or $10,000 just to kind of bridge a smaller gap. Some people on a larger scale, some businesses need 100, 200 plus thousands of dollars of operating credit. Plus, on top of that, they're buying a machine shop or they're buying a piece of equipment that will help them, buying a truck or something like that. So there's lots of different components of the credit that will get there. So it really just depends on the business and what they're needing and what they can support. And we'll find the right advisor that can certainly get what they need for that. So.
And credit rules differ on what you do, what your actual industry is. So credit policies for the restaurants are wildly different than they are for pretty much everything else, actually.
Yeah, restaurants is one of those ones that just has a higher level of risk because you think about it just in general, there's so much more turnover, there's so much potential for, the market's so saturated with so many other restaurants, fast food, et cetera, that a new one, especially if it's a non-franchise where that brand or that name hasn't existed before, it's a hard market to get into and kind of guarantee you're gonna be successful, so. Yeah, there's lots of different levels and lots of different avenues that you can do, depending on what you're looking for.
One more question.
Yeah.
You mentioned there was grants, so, if you were gonna go to you for a loan, are there more than just one type of government grants that you have access to?
So the government grant that it's Canada Small Business Financing is supported by the federal government, and essentially, it's not just a grant, like for what we're doing at the bank, it's not just an injection of money as far as here's some money to help you get going. As a startup, it's the government and the bank working together to help mitigate some of the risk of lending. So, where, for example, if you came in with, again, brand new business, as we talked about, no history, no experience, nothing to really show for it, except a really good business plan to say what we thought it's gonna be successful. Again, it's based on that. The bank has certain levels of how much money are you comfortable putting in to get started, the scale of the down payment. Typically, if all else being equal, the bank would usually look around 25% as kind of the starting point. With the government grant or the government guarantee program, we can bring that down to as low as 10%. So you still want to have some money in the game, but that way you can help offset some of that initial startup cost you might need to be able to get going. So things like that. And I mean, that being said, from the financing perspective, there are lots of other places to go to get or to look at opportunities for grants for startups or for whether it's from money or expertise or certainly people to talk to as far as that goes. There are places to go for that. And certainly the second here might have some connections to talk about that. Depending on the industry, there's, for example, like in tech, there's Tech Edmonton, which is a resource for that industry, and the same thing with any other sectors. There's going to be valuable people to talk to. So yeah, there are certainly grants available for people wanting to get started, and depending on the business and the industry. But from a financing perspective, it's not just a here's $50,000 from RBC to start your business, but it's more of a we're going to use this program that we are connected with the government to help offset our risk to be able to better allow us to finance your startup.
It's still a loan.
Any questions or anything we haven't touched on that you were interested in?
So when it comes to starting a business, do you think you're better off trying to, so let's say it's a new idea. Are you better off trying to start a business plan right away or test out the idea in the market, like build some kind of MVP and then just like iterate and see where it goes? And then maybe once you get to your finished product, then start working on your business plan. Because I know like people I've talked to said it can take like hundreds of hours, like how like in-depth it is if you're going to do all your market research and everything. Like if you present to the bank, it can take that long.
For sure. I'd say yes and yes. I mean, depending on like depending on the industry, depending on if you have a shell of an idea that you at least put some initial thought into, that gives you at least a better language to say it's just worth my time considering. If you come up with a whole bunch of hurdles, a whole bunch of either costs or time-related expenses that are going to be something that's kind of hard to get over initially, is it worth something that as a long-term goal you think it's worth it to pursue? Then at least it can give you a framework to decide whether it's something that might be an idea to still work on and actually, not necessarily the hundreds of hours, but you'll put in a few hours, a couple hours a day over the course of a week or two to kind of say, as a framework of what I'm looking for, is this something that's going to make sense to actively pursue further? And then, by the time you get to the financing or the investor conversations, you're going to want to have a more thorough, put together document. But at the end of the day, it's really just, if you've got something you can run with and you don't need a lot of work ahead of time to put into, you can just kind of test the waters and see what it looks like. But if it's something that you want to say, is this even worth my time to consider going forward? If this is a grain of an idea that might not be worth for you to consider, then at least you can put some initial thought in it.
Yeah, and I think just getting ideas down helps retain them, because then you'll come up with ideas, and if it changes in the future, you can always, like he says, it's a working document, right? So what it is now might be different. Even if it's not fully done, you can still come in and, for example, we can discuss, like, you talk to people even when they're not done. There's certain factors that might be more important for us than for someone else to get your business plan. So there's varying degrees of done. So it really depends. But I'd say having one now and changing it in a year when you have better knowledge, I mean, it doesn't hurt, doesn't it? Just probably only better for you.
Could you describe your successful applicants? How many are
do they come from a trade background, or is it a franchise background? And how many of them are just kind of mavericks doing their own thing? What are the best candidates, and what are the characteristics of your successful candidates?
I would say, so we have a mixed bag, actually. We have people that will be tradesmen, and then they just bought dog daycare. You know, they just jumped across because they wanted to. It really depends. You have some people who want to own a business because they want to be entrepreneurs. You have other people that want to own their job. There's a difference there. If they're it comes down to how passionate they are ultimately about the business that they're trying to start. A huge portion, a huge thing is the full plan. We talked about people come in at different points of the staging process. We've had people sign 10-year leases when they don't have business plans. They have an idea and they're really passionate about it, and they would do really well, right? But I think there's steps, and so people that follow the steps are really well organized and plan really well are the ones that maybe succeed more so than someone in a particular industry or anything like that.
Am I right in thinking that anybody with a trade background has got a very simple business plan ahead of them if they choose to embrace it?
It completely depends on different factors. You could have somebody who knows the industry really well and has worked in it their whole life, but can't just get a brand new business off the ground because, as Kyle said, you have a lot of upfront expenses. Financial picture is different for everybody. It really comes down to every case scenario and how the whole picture looks. I know you said it's like easily if you know the trade industry really well, how could you not just start up your own practice? But there's only so many clients. There's a lot of competition out there. Lots of external factors. SWOT analysis would be great in this case. But
trade background would be just as good as having a franchise. You would have your processes, their common sense, they're known ahead of time.
Absolutely, and it's a
All
great
you
point.
need to do is step into it and then win the battle, a few battles.
For sure, and it totally depends, as Colin said, on the industry. Like if you worked in an industry for 20 years and have a whole bunch of contacts and can certainly, you think about the oil and gas sector in Alberta, whether you've got the connections and the contacts, whether you're a consultant or whether you're starting like a machiner, putting manufacturing or something. There's lots of people that have been very successful because they've got those connections across the industry. But as Colin said, based on are those connections coming with the competition of knowing that if you leave company ABC that's very successful and kind of done their own thing, and you've been a successful cog in that machine, and then you step off to do your own thing, you may still know those connections, but kind of planting the seed ahead of time maybe before you make that leap to say, is there enough? Because I've got clients on my desk that this company did all the big work, but there's still enough, and they know the industry well enough to know that there's a little stuff that's kind of not being taken on by the bigger companies, that there's a niche market for that, and they can kind of do that and be successful doing that, and kind of take the overflow of what the bigger company would focus on from a grander scale. So they've still got the connections with the client companies that they know that they can make work. And then they can kind of just feed off the stuff that may not be the bigger job that they would want to do as a sole proprietor or as an individual anyways, and they can still be successful doing that. And it's an interesting point you made about the franchise, because coming to something like a business plan, there's pros and cons about doing a franchise versus doing your own thing. The franchise, just like a banker and investor, they want you to be successful because now it's their name on the building that they're going to want to have success built as well. So they're going to have a lot of the marketing and a lot of the operation side of things, a lot of the templates that put into this. They're going to do a lot of the legwork with you or jointly with you to make it successful. So on the plus side, there's a whole lot of expertise that they bring to the table. On the downside, you have to share your success with them because there's the cost of upfront buying into the franchise, some of the ongoing operation stuff that they're going to be a part of. So they help with a lot of the startup stuff, but there's also some of that shared cost and expenses with that. So it really just depends on the industry and what you're looking to do as to whether that may or may not be a best fit. And there's companies that will be kind of like a dating app for franchises. If it's something where you don't want to necessarily go through all the legwork of starting your own thing, but you do want to be your own boss, they will match available franchises with people that are a right fit for them and kind of just set you for success that way too. So there was a question here, and then we'll come to yourself at the end too. So,
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys always or like generally expect a business plan, or do people look into this company with a business idea and you kind of help create a business plan if they just don't know what to do?
So we pretty much, it happens a lot. With the financial statements, I was kind of doubling back saying that they're mandatory. That's always the biggest hurdle with people that are trying to start out, because everybody's an expert, or we should hope an expert in the niche of what they're trying to start a business, but the actual ownership and financial statements, things that come along with owning your business are all new as they're just going through. We can't help with the business plan, and we can't write it for them. They could come to us and we could do what we just did. We could say what we're looking for. What we're looking for in the business plan will differ. In the case of the presentation here, a business plan in general, there's things you want to include. What we would look for specifically might be a little different than as Kyle's looking for something else. But we can help. We can point in the right direction. Sometimes we drag people across the finish line, but ultimately, you're only benefiting yourself doing it yourself. With financial statements, you're only bettering yourself by getting an accountant, understanding them, because you're going to be issuing them for the next, every year for infinity until you close down shop. So you need to understand it. The better you understand it yourself, the better for all of us. Kyle spoke that when we're doing credit apps, we do our own business case on everybody that's applying. So we have to speak to you. I have to speak to you, and what you bring to the table, your understanding, your expertise. If you can't demonstrate that to us, then we aren't going to put that in the application, right? So we want to see, it's a two-way street, I think. So we'll point them in the right direction, and sometimes with the financials, it's a struggle, and we drag them across the finish line to get deals done. But we can't write them or create them for them. We have templates on the website.
And it depends on the scope of what you're looking for too. Like if you're just needing smaller business, smaller scale, not needing a lot of investments or financing, but you just want some kind of just pointers in getting the right direction, or maybe you just need a small credit card just to get started with some of your initial stuff. As Colin said, there doesn't need to be a very complex or very thorough business plan in the scale of what you look at if you're buying a building or buying a whole bunch of startup equipment to get going. It's just at the end of the day, it's just what's going to work best for you. So as Colin said, it's your strengths, your best awareness of what's going to put you up for setting yourself for success. And the better you can speak to it from having done that research, the better you're going to be able to share that knowledge and success with other people. And when you're just describing your business or when you're asking for support or help as far as that goes. But it doesn't have to be necessarily at the same degree. There are companies and consultants that will put business plans together for you. Like that's their job, and you pay them to do that. But obviously, on a smaller scale, the more you can just do for yourself, just to think through from start to finish, just the more successful you're going to be that way. So, any question there? Yeah.
Just, how does a already existing business's success or perhaps lack thereof affect my possibility of starting a similar business? And I'll just give you some context so you can kind of put in context. In my hometown, there is a small business, and when it initially started, it did really well. And as we've gone through the years, it did well, and now it's taken kind of a nosedive, and it has more to do with the owner's lack of interest in running that business anymore. So there's a significant drop in business. So how would a situation like that affect the possibility of me starting a very similar business in that area?
Well, I think you just identified the first thing, is the fact that you've identified one of the potential weaknesses of the area. You know why that business who maybe started successful is no longer successful, and what you're bringing to the table that's different from what they were doing. Just the fact that it's going to be in, like you said, smaller towns. So it doesn't have to necessarily be across the street. If it's a smaller town, that's the market anyways. It's kind of just where you're dealing. So at the end of the day, if you can speak to that there's still a market for that business that you're bringing to the table, that you know that it's enough stuff that you can bring to the table from not only just your passion about what you're doing, whatever that industry might be, if it's yourself on your own, or if there's other team members that you're going to be bringing together, but certainly speaking to why you think that another company is no longer successful or has been less successful than maybe they started out being, but more importantly, why you still think there's a market for that industry, and why you think that that's something that can still be successful going forward, and the business case for that. And again, all the other factors we talked about, but at the end of the day, just that strength of what you bring to the table, and that there's still a market for that industry, and that you have identified things that you saw in success maybe in the beginning, and that you can bring to the table to still be successful, or that maybe the industry's evolved, and you know that they are no longer maybe as interested in where it used to, or they're stuck in the past where it used to be, and you see the direction it's going in the future, and that's what you bring to the table going forward, and you kind of have an idea that there's still a market for that, whatever that industry might be. Yeah, we're not going to say, oh, well, that one other company that's very similar to yours, they haven't been successful, so we're not gonna finance anything to help out with that industry ever anymore. It's, what else can we do to put that aside and focus on your case individually and why you think it's gonna be successful?
Like, we still do new restaurants, but something like 77% of restaurants will fail in the first couple of years. But new restaurants are still getting done, so I think it's huge to speak to granular even, detail, why do you think the other one failed, and what you would do different. Because they're not gonna condemn it just on the idea because another one failed, right, but how would you make it work? Like, what ideas do you have? Maybe you know people who have told you that it would be better if you did this, or if it would work this way. How are you gonna make it work, and really speaking to that? So it really comes down to just selling yourself, but, yeah, no, they don't look at ideas and shun them just because they maybe failed in the past, because again, we speak to the character of who's the, presenting it to us, and, again, then it's a whole financial, big picture thing of everything else, but, yeah.
Okay, well, please join me guys in thanking Kyle and Kathleen for their time